Welcome to the Beyond Physio Podcast, where we help you move, excel, and inspire others on your journey to your next level with knowledge and advice from experts and testimonials from our like-minded community. Today's guest is someone who truly lives and breathes that connection between fueling and performance. Kathy Maalouf is a registered dietitian and nutritionist with a powerful story and an even more powerful mission. Her journey started in sports and fitness from a very young age, but it was her dive into endurance athletics that really sparked a bigger question, which is, how do I fuel my body to go farther, to go faster, and to recover better? That question led her to change careers, return to school, and even earn a master's in nutrition, where she did a rotation at the U.S. Olympic and Paralympic Training Center up in Lake Placid, New York. To top that, Kathy is also an accomplished Ironman triathlete herself, and she recently retired from serving her country for 23 years as a Navy reservist. Today, Kathy works with athletes of all ages and levels, from weekend warriors to competitive endurance athletes, helping them to optimize performance through strategic, science-based, personalized nutrition. She blends cutting-edge science with real-world experience to solve one of the biggest challenges that athletes face, which is how to eat for energy, strength, recovery, and longevity. In this episode, we're going to dive into everything from race day fueling to hydration strategies to everyday nutrition habits, including how to get protein if you're a busy mom or dad who has a hard time getting nutrition down. We also talk about some common mistakes that I have made and that she has made even as seasoned athletes. So whether you are chasing a PR, training for your first triathlon, or maybe you just want to fuel your lifestyle better if you're into fitness, this episode is packed with insights that you don't want to miss. But before we dive into it with Kathy, as always, please consider subscribing to our channel so that you don't miss out on all the ways that you can optimize your fitness, running, or performance if you are a runner or everyday fitness athlete over 40. On our show today, we have Kathy Maalouf, who is, was that pronounced right?
That is correct.
Right, Kathy Maalouf, who is a registered dietitian. And Kathy, I really wanted to have you on our show because we have a lot of endurance athletes on our podcast, a lot of very active lifelong athletes over 30 and 40 who really want to do everything they can to keep their best health, fitness, and whatnot, their engine going for the rest of their lives. And as you and I both know, fueling is a very important part of this. I was actually pretty bad at fueling myself in my 20s and 30s. Yes, maybe we all were, right? And I was pretty bad at it because I was trying to do a lot of things fasted, and I thought that was the way to go. But I realized that during that time in my life when I was doing that, I was actually getting injured more. And I was just doing reps wrong. I was doing a lot of hard workouts and just getting totally gassed. And it wasn't until my 40s that I rediscovered that I need to be very mindful of my macros, and I need to be eating certain quantities of each, and we'll dive into that as well. So let's dive into this. I want you to share with our audience a bit about your journey from being immersed in fitness and now becoming a registered dietitian nutritionist.
Okay, well, first of all, thanks. Really appreciate being here today. This is my first time. So fitness, like I said, it's always been a part of my life. But it was just fun stuff before. As you're talking about being younger, it's just fun. Yeah. Fortunately, that has been maintained. I mean, why do it if it's not fun?
Exactly.
But, as you start to get a little older, like you were describing, you start to think more about the health impacts of fitness. So I went through that period. I was in the gym, playing racquetball, playing softball, playing basketball, doing all those things. And then I kind of got to the point, so I'm also a military veteran. I was in the...
Oh, that's awesome. A lot of respect.
I spent 23 years as a Navy reservist. I did 2 periods of active duty. So the Navy makes you do your physical training spring and fall. So each spring and fall we'd be doing running, whole mile and a half, push-ups, sit-ups, all that kind of stuff. So I was into the cycle of doing that. And as I started to say, okay, well, maybe I can do a little bit more than 3 miles a year. So I started to look at what's next? What's the next challenge? So then as things started, so I started to look at things as looking for the challenge then. But keeping that fun aspect in it. And as things started to get longer and started to get more intense, I said, I got to figure out a way to be able to do this better. So what are the things that I can control? I can't get any younger. I have not found a way yet. I'll just put it that way. So I can't get younger. I can't get more talented. And I can train harder, I can train better, train more effectively, and improve what I can do. But after a certain age, you're not going to get that much better. So it's just trying to look at the things I can control and the things I have the most influence on. And nutrition answered, it hit that button. So
was there like an aha moment for you where you're like, oh my gosh, this is what's missing?
Well, like through that journey, I wouldn't say there was an aha moment, but as I started to really dig the challenge, doing stuff for the challenge and trying to think of, okay, well, maybe it's time for me to do something else for a career. So I started to look at that and said, what are the things that I can do that I can really have fun at and make a living with? And that was looking at the things I can control. What can I control and what can I just take with me the rest of my life? We're all going to eat for as long as we're alive.
Thank God.
So that's where I ended up in nutrition.
It's amazing. So you went on this journey from being in the service, doing hard things, living an active lifestyle, and now we come to this point where you decided to pursue something in nutrition. What was that educational experience like for you?
So my background, my undergrad is in business. I've had a few serial careers. So my undergrad is in business. I was a computer systems manager. That's where I started.
Amazing.
Then that's when I decided to see what life in the military was like. So that's when I joined the reserves. So that's kind of been the constant through a lot of it. And then using my military experience, I then went into the government service as a civilian. And I was an intelligence analyst, a civilian intelligence analyst for the government for a while. So looking at all of those things, I just kind of kept going back to school to do something different.
Yeah.
So undergrad is in business. My first master's degree was in international studies, which is a combination of political science and history. So that served me for 2 careers. So I'm accustomed to just going back to school and learning something new. So, and again, that challenge, looking for the challenge. I went back to school, started as a second bachelor's, went into the master's program, switched from bachelor's to master's program. And then on top of that, once you finish your degree, you have to attend 1,200, at the time it was 1,200-hour internship through all the different disciplines of nutrition. Yeah. So looking at my past careers and just basically using the same analytical skills, the same curiosity, a lot of the same pieces just applied differently.
Yes, absolutely. Now, you had also spent some time at the U.S. Olympic and Paralympic Training Center.
So cool.
So I couldn't imagine. That was I would imagine, Colorado.
No, Lake Placid.
Lake Placid? Oh
yes.
My God, that's cool. And how did that actually start evolving your specialty into more towards sports nutrition?
So I knew I wanted to go into sports nutrition.
Oh, that was already from the get-go.
That was already decided. And I had in my head that my ultimate goal was going to be to have my own practice in sports nutrition. So I reached out. My husband and I have a house up in Lake Placid, so we spend a lot of time there.
Oh my God.
So I reached out to the dietitian there, and I said, hey, I'm looking to, as part of my internship, as one of my rotations, come and do it with you. So she said, okay, let me see what we need to do to make that happen. I had to do a bunch of training that they require from anybody who's going to work there in like vulnerable populations. Yeah. Just as if you were going to be a coach on a high school basketball team. You have to go through background checks and all that. But the thing that was really cool about being able to be a part of that was the relationship that the dietitian, Megan, she had such a great relationship with the athletes that were there. She was not a teacher, not someone to instruct you, but she was part of the team. She was there, she was a resource, they trusted her, they would come to her, and just to watch the way that they would interact, you could see the respect and you could see that they actually valued what she brought to the table. So I try to establish those kinds of relationships where I'm not going to tell you what to do. If you want to work together, we're going to work together. You're going to be in charge. You're the driver, but I'm the nav. I'm going to try and keep you with your goals there in mind and try and keep you on the road to get into those goals. But as a collaborator, not leading the car.
You mentioned two things, and the two C's are actually my two favorite ones when it comes to physio, and that's the curiosity and also the collaboration. And I 100% agree. I feel that as I've gotten more and more years under my belt as a clinician, it's really become more about how do we get the kind of outcome that you want to get. I can show you the tools, I can give you the tools, and I can do the things that are necessary. But if this is where you're heading, let's make sure that we're on the same plan together so that you are doing what I ask you to do and you're executing those things, because I can tell you that the clients who do very well with us are the ones who are good listeners and are willing to do what it takes to get to that same outcome. Yeah. The clients who don't do so well are the ones who maybe go beyond what's prescribed. We'll just say, well, you said 1 mile and I felt so good that I decided to go for 10.
Better,
exactly. Right? And now you're back at phase 1. Okay, great. Okay. So we tested it. Now we know what the outcome is. Let's go back to what the original plan was, and we'll go that way. And then the other part of it is a curiosity. I feel that as I've gotten older and I have more years again under my belt, I just become more curious about what is this person's coming in with. What is it that I can provide? What value can I provide from my experience and expertise that can help guide this person back on the path towards living the life they want to live, towards becoming the best version of themselves, to get over that performance plateau, to get over those chronic injuries. So thank you for bringing that part up.
It's my favorite part.
One question I had was, were there any kinds of specific athletes or sports that you had to work with at the training center in Placid?
We were mainly working with the sliders at the time of the year that I was there. So we were working with the bobsled, skeleton, luge. It was sliding time of year. So I was actually surprised that the skaters don't train there. They actually train, at that time, they trained in Canada. They trained in Canada and some out in Colorado, but sliding is really big in Lake Placid, so we were working with the sliders.
So, quick question on these athletes. I would imagine it's high intensity, very anaerobic for what they're doing. Was there caloric demand or the types of the macros you had to sort of track for them, were they different for them versus somebody that you might train for endurance?
Yeah, because like you said, these guys they're essentially track and field athletes
with ice.
On ice. So yeah, they're geared more to that 10-second push in the beginning. And then it's the fine motor skills. So you do have to keep their attention. Yeah. Because you're not just training and feeding the brute force. You're also training, your brain is going to run on primarily carbohydrate. Yeah. So you have to keep that up in order so that they can keep their focus. Because it doesn't take much to turn one of those things over, and it's not a good day.
I would imagine also just the intensity and stress of that moment. It's a very short race for the most part. And so if you don't have everything together, it could be really nerve-wracking. Let's go into the foundations of performance nutrition, because as I said, our audience, we have a lot of endurance athletes and very active people over 30. What do you think are the most critical principles for people in this age group to understand?
So I'm going to go right to the name of my practice.
Yes.
It's initials are FPR, fuel, perform, recover.
Love it.
That's the cycle. You're starting out, what do you got to do? You got to fuel. You don't put the gas in the tank after you get home. That's great. You put the gas in the tank before you leave on your trip. So you're talking about carbohydrates, you're talking about fats to a certain extent. So you know what you're fueling for. You're fueling for your performance. Now, I should stop there. Running underneath all of that, you're fueling for health. I mean, because if you don't have that general health, what you're going to do in the period of time that you're training is not going to overcome all of the rest of the hours in the day. Yeah. So starting with the fueling, know what you're fueling for, know what your expectations are for the next part, for your performance. What's your intensity, what's your duration, and that's kind of going to drive your fueling. And then probably the most important part is the recovery. So you're going through that cycle. So when you're talking about recovery, you're talking about basically three things. Number one, going back to the beginning, refueling. So you drained that energy. You drained your glycogen stores. You've drained the things that are going to make you be able to perform. So you got to reload that. You got to rehydrate. You got to put the fluids back in there, because that's what makes everything work together nicely. You got to put the electrolytes back in, because that's what's signaling everything. So you got to do your rehydration, and then you got to do your rebuilding. So your muscles, because that's where the good stuff happens in the recovery.
Exactly.
That's when you're making your adaptations to the training the performance, the training. So you got to get those 3 R's in your recovery so you can go back again and do it
Again.
from the beginning.
I'm so glad you talked about that. One of the things I talked about in a lecture I gave to runners, it was basically talking about the levers that we can pull that are in our control that can help promote longevity in the sport that we want to do. In the case that I did the class for, it was for runners. And so longevity in running. And one of the things that we constantly ask in our first session is, tell me about your nutrition. Oh, well, I eat this and this. And then, do you track your macros at all? And a lot of them, and some of our runners are very high level, very elite level. And it seems to be one of those things that is sort of, oh, I think I eat enough. And perhaps the guesstimates are off. And I think without a guided plan, especially if you're taking your activities very seriously, it might lead to some consequences down the line because you're not doing what you need to do to fuel properly. Therefore, your performance goes downhill. And therefore, your recovery sucks because you're not putting, like you said, the gas back in the tank afterwards. So talk to us about some practicality as far as what athletes can do, or everyday athletes can do, I would say, to make sure that they are on the right track to getting what they need in their system.
So you got to know where you are, first of all. I kind of like to have people tell me first. I don't like to do most of the talking in the first few sessions. You tell me. So tell me what your day is like, because kind of mentioned it before, you might be training an hour or two that day. There's another 23, 22 hours that you're accounting for. Tell me what those are like too, because we really want to be able to make everything work together, and it's just so much easier if we can make it all work together. So what's your morning like? What's your sleep like? How do we make this easy for you to get to where you need to be? So I guess part of the things that we're looking at is on one of my intake forms, it's called a day in the life. So tell me what your day is like. What time do you usually get up? How many hours of sleep do you usually have? How do you feel when you get up? What's the first thing that you eat? What's the first thing that you drink? When is that? Then what's your work day like? When is your next training session? What happens in the evening? What time do you go to bed? So I'm trying to get an overall sense of what's going on throughout the day, so I see where those opportunities are to get the fueling in, so I can tell you where you need to get the fueling in and where you need to be aware of sensing what's going on in your own body, so that you don't need me all the time, so that you can say, okay, I didn't recognize what my hunger cues were. I'm relying way too much on caffeine, because your energy is going to come from what you're eating. So we need to stage the things that you are going to eat when you need them. We'll figure out kind of how much. I'm going to look at your weight history. If your weight's fluctuating a lot, then we've got a lot of places where we're maybe peaking and valleying. So I want to try and get those peaks in. I want to get those peaks in before you have a peak activity. So I don't really get into so much about what you need to be eating yet, because I need to find out first when you need to be fueling. And then we can start to take a look at what that fueling needs to look like. Did that?
That absolutely, yeah. And now for the everyday person who just wants to do fitness and they're going to like a CrossFit or they're going to group training, because we have a lot of clients from these types of activities. Are there things that they should also sort of keep in mind as far as their fueling? Because they're not training for a thing, training for life, I guess.
Yeah.
Are there some basic bare bones you can sort of provide that would help them to know that these are the things you should be definitely putting in your system?
Yeah, so a lot of people kind of dismiss hydration. Like I said before, part of recovery is rehydrating, because that makes everything run better.
Exactly.
So make sure you're hydrated. That means not guzzling the
before.
water or the sports drink right before. So you want to try and get that in throughout the day, just the drip feed throughout the day, rather than the guzzling in the 5 minutes before you're going to start the class. You want to make sure you're spacing things out. Give yourself a little time before you're going to need that fuel.
Yeah.
So try and back it up like an hour and a half before you're going to be there, kneading it to give it a chance to get into the tank. When you're looking at what you want to be putting in general terms, you want to be starting out with some protein and a little more carbohydrate than protein in the beginning. So then you're probably in a class situation like that, you're probably going to be working out for less than an hour. So don't worry about taking in any fuel during that time. Yeah. But when you're done, take advantage so that all the work that you've done has really gotten your muscles really primed as they're sensitized to pull in that recovery fuel. 100%. So that's where you're gonna put your bigger chunk of protein in, but don't forget the carbs. Yeah. Because without the carbohydrate, I mean, it's just like a stack of bricks. Yeah. Unless you got the mason there to put the bricks together, that's not going to do as much as you could get by putting the two of them together. Got it. So you want to try and get that fairly close. One of the controversies is about that window, that anabolic window.
Yeah, I was going to ask you about that.
When that window closes, and it doesn't really close that quickly, that entirely. Yeah. So you do have kind of a few hours to take advantage of the best parts. But if you don't get a chance to eat within that hour or two, just make sure you do eat something after that, because you don't want to miss that opportunity. So again, part of the recovery is refueling, rehydrating, and then rebuilding, and that's what's going to help you rebuild. Is to get that post-workout meal or snack in.
So then if I were to recap that, it sounds like a little bit of protein, more carbs before I work out, an hour or so before. Afterwards, during the training, probably not. It's only about an hour or less. Afterwards, make sure that within some period of time, hopefully within less than a few hours, more protein, a little bit less carb to help get the recovery. I'm sorry, more
protein, but even more carb. So the afterwards, I like a 1-to-3 ratio. Sure. So if you have about 20 grams of protein, so 20 to 25 will usually work for most people. But then you want a 3-to-1 ratio, so you're going to look at like 60 grams plus of carbohydrate to go along with that.
And let's just say for the busy parent who is like, oh, well, I don't have time to get the protein in there, whatever, before my workout, would like a gel be enough to get them going? Something like that.
Are you talking about on the before? Yeah, that'll work. If you have a couple of the snacks that you could think about is even a piece of fruit. Yeah. Piece of fruit is going to give you your carbohydrate. Yeah. If you want to add a little protein to that, put a little peanut butter on it, just a little, because you don't really want a lot of fat beforehand.
You burping that up during the workout.
And it's just that it's going to sit there. Yeah. It's the last thing that's going to leave. So things like that. If you're like, oh crap, my session starts in 15 minutes, but I'm hungry, I need something. That's when you can go for like a sports drink. Yeah. You can go for your Gatorade, your Powerade. That's where that goes in. So I don't like to, maybe we'll get into this later, talk about eating clean. Yeah. There's the practical side, where it's better than having nothing.
I'm so glad you said that.
Yeah. So I would rather you get something in, even if it's not perfect. Yeah. Don't let perfect be the enemy of good.
Yes. So glad you said that. Let's go back into our endurance world. Now, I've been training for this marathon. I don't know if you heard the news. So on Sunday is my big race, my big debut.
Sunday?
Yes.
This week?
Holy cow. So Sunday, the Jersey City Marathon. I've been training for the last...
April. Yes. Oh, cool.
Thankfully, it's going to be a good day. I've been training fairly well, I would say. I got my long runs in and whatnot. One of the questions I had would be, is your nutrition going to be different during race week versus when you're base building and going through your training phase?
Yeah, so when you're, nothing you can do about it now, sorry.
It's too late. Oh no, I should have this podcast a few weeks ago.
So yes, it is going to be different. So what we're looking at during those base build and peak times is that's when you're kind of developing your race strategy, your race nutrition then, because you don't want to be on race day.
I've made the mistake, Kathy, way too many times I can count, trying new things. Like just, something on Google, let me try that, and then just totally blowing the race out.
It's a good way to fail.
Yes.
Yeah.
Which I have been doing that, so I'm just letting you know.
The golden rule, nothing new on race day, on game day, competition day. But so the differences that you'll see between that building phase and race week is you're kind of developing all of those things. You're seeing what's going to work in terms of the nutrition that's going to work on your long run, the nutrition that's going to work for your recovery. So really you can't change that now, but that's what happens during that time. So you might be trialing 5 different products just to see what's going to work for you. Your weekday sessions are typically not that long. It's usually the weekend sessions that are the long days. But those weekday sessions are just kind of try things and then see how they work on your long run. Do I like the taste? Do I like the texture? Those kinds of things. And then the long run is where you're going to see how it plays out over the course of a couple hours. Once you get to your taper, your training is going down, the volume is going down, the intensity is going down, your intake is going down accordingly. Because again, now in training world, you're consolidating all those gains that you made. All those adaptations are set. You're good. So you don't have the demand signal for as much. So you are tapering both your training and your nutrition. You're not taking in as much. It's not the time to say, oh crap, I got another 5 pounds to lose. So you want to try and stay, where you're comfortable. Make sure that you're still getting enough energy in, enough carbohydrate in, enough protein in, that you are maintaining those things, but it is going to be lower. And then I think I skipped this before when we were talking about the hydration piece. When people, if you've done did you do any like sweat testing for sweat rate? And
I did about a year ago, but I haven't done one since.
Okay. Yeah. Because those things change.
Absolutely. And I've also heard that it's actually better to have and it makes sense to me now, to have the sweat test done while you're doing an activity.
Many times. Time and time again.
Good to know.
So, for next time. So for your particular day, I just had the thing that I was gonna ask you a question. And what was it? Say what you said before.
About race week versus base building.
So let me ask you the question. What do you think of carb loading?
So from what I understand, there's been a lot of back and forth in literature about what is appropriate for based on distance, based on what your training is. But what I've also recently read is that it shouldn't be more than a day or two before the race.
Right.
I think the mistake people have made in the past is that the whole freaking week, they're just like totally pounding it down, pounding down the pasta. And as you said, as their activity's tapering down, it's almost as if their caloric increase intake is increasing. Yes, exactly. So does that sound right to you?
So yes, precisely. That's good answer. Good answer.
Well, you got to thank my coach, James. So James, shout out to you once again.
So carb loading, it's different than it used to be. And it's certainly different than the pasta dinner the night before the New York City Marathon. Like you said, typically it can be a day, it can be 2 days, depending on the overall distance that you're looking at. But you do want to take advantage of that time to top off your glycogen stores, to top off your hydration, and just make sure that you're going in. If you're in peak physical condition, make sure that you've got the peak fuel on board.
How much and we don't have to go over like numbers or math, but like as far as like a day or two, we're talking about a day or two before the race. Obviously I have my plan already laid out, so I've been following what my coach has had me do. From what I understand, it should be definitely more on the carbs, of course, just to top off the glycogen. There should be less protein and less fats than you normally would take, maybe less fiber as well. Does that sound about right?
Definitely less fiber.
Yeah.
So
for many reasons.
Yes, for many reasons. But so number one, because if you're taking in less overall, if you take in more fiber, it's going to make you feel more full.
Yes.
So actually that's a lie, that's backwards. Oh. So if you're backing up towards the training, on those days when you have lower training requirements, we're probably going to feed you more fiber on those days because you're still going to be hungry. Yes. You're still going to want food. So we're going to put in a little more fiber because it's a little more satiating. Yes, but as we get closer, you definitely want to back that off in the last 3 or 4 days before the race.
Great. So I feel like I'm on the right place. I do feel, and I don't know this is my first marathon, so I have to ask, but I do feel a little sluggish, especially since I've been increasing my carb intake. Is that further normal?
Yep, because it's the glycogen. Okay. Especially if you haven't been.
Definitely not this much. So. It's surprising.
let's see, today's Friday,
Yeah.
Saturday, Sunday. Yeah. So you could start I would say start this afternoon.
Yes.
And into Saturday, and then start to back off like Saturday afternoon, Saturday evening. You're going to want a less intake Saturday afternoon and Saturday evening.
Got it. And then morning of, you take a little bit more, I would say, and then you're off to the races.
And again, there you're looking at virtually no fiber.
Yes.
But just enough to kind of get you set up for it.
For sure.
And I particularly like in the pre-race morning, more so fluids than...
So fluid sources of carbs versus, that makes sense.
Yeah.
What's your favorite, race day fueling,
So I actually make my own.
Oh, of course you do.
Partially. So I like different things. I have a different fuel mix for swim and bike than I do for run for a couple of different reasons. Number one, flavor fatigue.
Yeah.
I don't like to have the same thing for both. I have a little protein in my bike mix. I don't have any protein in my run mix. So for the bike and for the swim, just for ease of transition, I make my own base, which is simply water, table sugar, lime juice, and salt.
Simple.
So I take that as the base, and then I get nothing for these products, but I like Science and Sport Beta Fuel.
I've heard of it. Okay, yeah.
And so I mix those two things together. Because the SIS Beta Fuel is pretty high carbohydrate-wise, and at my age, I don't need that much. So I reduce it with my home mix. Yeah. So it kind of gets me at about 45 grams. So I like that on my bike. That's got a little bit of protein in it, just for satiety, and I would only do that on something that's more than 3 hours, basically. On the run, I do Scratch super high carb.
Oh, nice.
Because it's scalable.
Yeah.
It scales nicely, and it's a different flavor.
Yes.
So I like the way it scales. That works for me. What I also use for both the bike and the run, I like a PBJ on the bike.
Oh, okay.
So that'll give me a little bit of protein too. Yeah. So I'll start off with a PBJ on the bike before I just go with the liquid. But I will also go with bread.
Straight up, plain white.
So plain white bread, take the crusts off.
Okay.
And then roll it up into either little balls or little squares. Yeah. And I put it in a little bag. And I have, for flavor fatigue, there's only so much sweet you can handle.
Absolutely.
So that kind of breaks that. It's still really easily digestible.
Yeah, definitely. Because
it's just white bread. Yeah. And it's also something to chew.
Yes.
Something, because again, when you're talking about racing for
multiple hours,
12, 14, 15 hours,
oh my gosh.
It's just something different.
Yeah.
So I like that too.
That's great. And if you were just, say, training for the marathon, not that I would change anything, would you just then take that run part of what you would normally do in a triathlon and just take that?
Well, I would, yes and no. I use the same basic elements, but I use less because it's a shorter duration. So I don't need as much.
Yeah. Let's talk about some myths that maybe you and I have both encountered in the endurance sports world when it comes to nutrition. One of the things I find, we're going to dive into protein in a bit, is that a lot of runners end up not taking as much protein as they should. They're a little bit more carb heavy for obvious reasons, but they kind of forget that protein is a really necessary building block for that recovery and for their next training run. What are your thoughts on that?
So protein in the endurance world has really two primary uses. When you're doing pretty high intensity for an endurance time period, you are going to use more protein, you're going to oxidize more protein as fuel than you would regularly. If you're talking about a high intensity for a pretty significant period of time, you're going to burn about 10%. 10% of your fuel is going to be coming from protein. Yeah. So having that in there is pretty good. It's a good idea to have it.
Yeah.
And then like you were talking about, afterwards you definitely need it.
Yeah.
So you definitely want to get that rebuilding going. And it's not just the muscles. I mean, so there's obviously your muscles are protein and you're going to need that to rebuild it. But also there's a lot of other proteins in your body that are getting broken down and that you want to enhance.
Sure.
Things like mitochondria.
Yes. Powerhouse.
Yeah. I mean, That's protein. All those proteins, the enzymes that are fueling all of those biochemical reactions are proteins. So you want to have that. Capillaries, building better blood flow with better capillaries. You're going to do that with the protein. So it's beyond just the brute strength part, but there's also all of those proteins that your body needs to do all of those other functions that are in there that you need to replace. And you want to make sure you have enough protein that the protein is able to do those things. So you want to have enough carbohydrate to free up the protein to be able to do those things, because that's where you're really going to get your money's worth out of it.
Yeah. That's funny. You're reminding me of a myth that I still hear, even though it's been dispelled many times, and that's, well, if I eat too many carbs, it's going to make me fat.
It happens. It does happen, but eating the biggest problem is just eating too much.
Too many calories
in
general,
So you have to see where those calories are coming from and where you're using them. So you're trying to get that energy balance, but you also have to, it's highly individualized in terms of how your body is going to process that fuel. Whether it's going to go for, based on your intensity, whether you're going to be burning fat, burning carbohydrate. You're going to burn less carbohydrate, or carbohydrate for a shorter period of time, but because of those high intensities. You can't maintain those high intensities forever, but that's what the carbohydrate is doing for you. It's allowing you to get to those high intensities. Fat is a big part of what we're going to be burning if we're working at a lower intensity for a long period of time. So the carbohydrate is still required, but based on how your body is going to burn those fuels, there's always going to be a mix of fuels. So it's going to be how your body, how your makeup, biochemistry is working, and what the hormones are signaling. Are the hormones signaling save things? Are the hormones signaling burn things? So a lot of it comes down to your hormonal your hormonal balance also.
So then, as far as let's get back to protein now. The difference that maybe endurance athletes versus strength athletes, or maybe the gym goer who does a group training class, for example, are there different protein needs, or is there sort of a baseline that everybody should hit, Kathy?
There are different needs. We're going back to performance again. What is it? What is your objective in terms of what are your performance goals? So if you're going to the gym 4 or 5 days a week, you're spending an hour a day, maybe 4 or 5 days a week, your base protein needs are probably around 1 gram per kilogram. The RDA is 0.8, but you got to remember what RDAs are for is to prevent deficiency. So if you're doing you're not sedentary, you got to give yourself a little extra. So looking at just that kind of the general recreational person, looking at around 1 gram per kilogram for just maintenance. But again, where are we placing them? That's what we want to see. And how much of your overall calorie intake is it going to be? So kind of balancing a couple of different things in there. But the starting point is usually around 1 gram per kilogram. Endurance athletes, you're going a little bit higher, usually around 1.2 to 1.4. And I'm using these numbers. I mean, think of 1.2, 1.4. It's a guide. It's a place to start. And then on the strength side, the resistance side, you're talking about more like 1.6, 1.7. So it's, if you just look at the pyramid or the incline, it's incrementally going up based on the type of activity that you're doing.
Now, I know we talked about timing for generally for fueling. Is there something that we should consider as far as before, during, or after? I think during, we're probably not going to take any protein. But before or after that we should consider with protein, specifically depending on the endurance or during activity. So endurance versus strength athlete versus an everyday gym goer.
Not really, not so much. Generally speaking, you probably don't need anything beforehand if your workout is less than an hour, or if it's not really high intensity. If you're getting a little bit higher intensity and duration, either for strength or for endurance, a little bit's not going to hurt you. It's one of those controversial things. Some people say it doesn't do any good. Some people say it does some good. My view is it's not going to hurt. Might as well put it in there,
Right.
prime that pump a little.
Yeah.
But it's not as important as the afterward. So you want to make sure you get it in afterwards, though, because that's when, again, you're consolidating those gains, you're feeding those training adaptations that you're looking for.
Yeah. One of the things that I come across, I don't know if you've heard Peter Attia talks about his All Into Longevity. One of the things he had recommended based on his research for the man or woman who is over 30, where there is muscle breakdown that happens more naturally because of age. One of the ways to combat that actually is to almost superload on protein, where it's almost closer to 1 gram per pound body weight. I'm wondering what your feelings are on that.
It's highly individual. I would say start maybe at a lower level, see how you feel, and then if you feel like you can take more in terms of your overall, remember your overall calorie intake.
Right. More than anything, yeah.
And then how you want to divide that up between your protein, your carbohydrate, and your fats.
I've read that with protein supplements or protein in general, it doesn't really matter where you obtain it, the source of it, as long as you're getting the quantity that you need for maybe your goals and your outcomes that you want to hit. Do you have any thoughts on maybe better protein sources for people? Obviously, I think you and I both would say that whole foods are a better way to go generally, but like whey protein versus plant-based proteins, is there something that you'd recommend, aside from preferences for obvious reasons, that they take one or the other, or does it really matter?
So it's personal preference to a large degree, but in the post-workout period, I usually recommend something like a whey protein, whether you get that from a whey protein supplement or whether you get it from yogurt, milk, other kind of dairy. Whey protein gets absorbed much quicker.
Yes, for sure.
So that's when you want to feed that in there. Casein protein is a more slow digesting protein. Cottage cheese is the best example of that. I tend to recommend people have a bedtime snack. If you want to try and get more protein and get the most out of it, have a bedtime snack of some cottage cheese. Oh. And then when you go to bed, that'll keep working for you.
Oh, interesting.
That'll keep working for you in your overnight.
Yeah.
So that's a good way to get a little extra in with very little impact calorie-wise, but an outsized contribution to your protein.
Are there better plant-based proteins than others? For example, I know there's pea protein and there's brown rice protein. Do you have a recommendation there?
Pea protein is more robust. There's soy protein, there's rice protein, but pea protein is what you'll find actually in most plant-based protein supplements because it's a little more robust. Legumes in general. Yes. So beans are a great source of where you get your carbs and your protein in one package.
Absolutely.
So that's a great opportunity to get a twofer also.
Got it. So we've talked about athletes, we talked about people like us who are just super intense into triathlon, endurance sports and whatnot. For our everyday person, our everyday professional who's juggling family, work, training, what are some very easy practical strategies that they can implement to improve their nutrition without getting too overwhelmed? Because sometimes we're like, forget it, I can't even count my calories anyway. Are there some very basic tips that you would recommend?
So what I usually recommend for people is, depending on your family situation, try and get everybody eating the same thing.
So easy.
You know, even if it's at different times, like your kids got practice, you got to work late, even if it's at different times, have them only prepare one thing. Because it's just going to, if you got to, two things, if you got to then feed the kids chicken nuggets just to get something in them, they'll be better off if you've done a little of the prep work and you're having similar things. That's the high level, is just try to get everybody on the same page. It'll be so much easier. Batch cook or always cook extra because it's there then. So I know it's probably old school, crock pots.
Oh, love that, or Instapot.
Crock pot, Instapot. It's cooking while you're not there. You can actually, I have a bunch of recipes that I have for crock pot, Instapot, where you prep it. If you do your prep on your training day off or whatever, those things, you put them together, you put them in the freezer, you take them out, put them in the crock pot. That's good to go. When you get home, when everybody gets home, it's there, it's available for you. A couple other things that I like in terms of snacking and breakfast for dinner.
Yes.
There are so many good breakfast foods. Don't get caught up on the label. If you want to have an omelet, a vegetable omelet, have the vegetable omelet. Have it with some toast. Make it breakfast. Have a glass of milk with it. Have a protein shake with it. Just try and simplify things. Use frozen fruits and vegetables. They're in the freezer. Yeah. They are so oftentimes fresher than fresh.
That's right. I've heard that before.
Because they are quick frozen right off of the field, and and the fresh asparagus that you're getting might have been in the truck for 3 days, but it's always there. Great for smoothies. It's also a way to kind of hide extra fruits and vegetables from your kids. But yeah, use frozen. Don't get caught up on labels. In terms of then like physical strategies, when you pack your bag in the morning because you have a workout after work or before work, pre-stage as much as you can so that you are less likely to forget to grab. So if you have like a soft-sided cooler where you keep your snacks in, put it next to your gym bag. There's nothing in it, but put it there so you say, I got to get the stuff out of the fridge to put it in my cooler. So I will have my snack when I'm on my way to my workout, or whether it's after my lunchtime workout and I just need a snack. I should have a snack. So things like that. Just try and make things physically easier, and to do that staging, have the plan, know that you're going to fail. Know that there are days like you forget your towel when you go to swim.
I hate that happen. Oh my God, my least favorite thing.
You forget your sneakers. You know you're going to fail. It's going to happen. Say, all right, okay, I blew it. How can I fix it next time? And just move on. But yeah, so use the frozen. Make as much as you can in advance, and just have it there, and try and keep everybody on the same page for simplicity.
One of my clients, we had a funny conversation. She had said that, and I didn't think of it until she had said it this way, which was, well, when you make in bulk, you're basically eating leftovers every day. And she has a problem with leftovers. So I was like, oh my God, I never thought of it that way, but I can see how that's perceived.
Don't eat it the next day. Eat it 2 days later.
There you go.
Personally, I see that. I don't like to eat the same thing 2 days in a row. So I have 2 things that I've made, so I can go like that.
Alternate.
Yeah.
Do you have any personal go-to snacks or meals that sort of balance all the macros, protein, carbohydrate, and fats?
I've talked about smoothies before. I think smoothies are great. They're kind of divided into things that need refrigeration and things that don't.
Yeah.
I talked about PB&Js on my bike. Yeah. PB&J, that's one of my go-tos. Chocolate milk, I think some of these things might sound trite, but they work. Yeah. So your chocolate milks, your yogurt, you can dress it up with some nuts or nut butter, some fruit, anything that you want to add to it. Breakfast cereals, we talked about breakfast for dinner, breakfast cereals. Some of them are really good. I'm not talking about Fruit Loops, but there are some really good breakfast cereals. You bring that with you to work, you have your baggie of cereal, you have your yogurt in the fridge. Those 2 things can go together. Or you can have it the old-fashioned way with milk. Or you can just eat it as a snack. Some of the just plain flakes are really good. Crunchy snacks, they work with that. French toast. If I'm making French toast for breakfast, I'm not making 4 slices of French toast. I'm making like a dozen. Goes really good as a snack. Put some peanut butter or whatever nut butter you like on it. That makes a great snack. It's got everything you need. Yeah. So those kinds of things I think they tend to work really well in terms of like packaged foods. Again, I don't get anything for this, but like Belvita biscuits are good.
Oh, I love Belvita biscuits actually, yeah.
And you can dip them in yogurt, get a little more protein with that. Kind bars, Clif bars, just stuff that's convenience. And like we were talking about before, it's better than not having anything. Have it with you. It doesn't go bad. It just sits there so you have it in the background.
I'm glad you said that because we have a lot of clients who do a lot of traveling for work, and sometimes it's hard to stay consistent with nutrition, staying with clean eating. But I think to your point where we talked about before the show was it's more important to get in the food, whether it may not be always natural or may not always be whole foods, but you need the calories, you need the macros to be able to sustain your body between workouts. So whether or not you may have to make some choices.
Don't let perfect be the enemy of good.
Yeah, there we go. I love it. So let's talk about physical therapy, nutrition. And I love this diagram that you've created. And by the way, we'll include this as a download for anyone on the who listens to the show, and we'll have a link for this. But basically, providing nutrition for the injured athlete, because that is who we often treat. How do you think that nutrition can complement recovery from an injury or complement physical therapy in general?
It must.
I like that. Thank you.
It must.
This is the part I love talking about with our clients because they don't realize how important it is.
Treat it like any other workout session, because that's what it is. It's your workout session. And you've got even more riding on it because you're trying to get back from an injury.
Repair tissue and
yeah.
whatnot, yeah.
So it must. You're following the same principles. You got to fuel beforehand. You got to make sure that you are ready to be able to execute those therapeutic exercises so that you are going to get back to where you want to be. So you need to have the fuel, you need to have the hydration, and then you need to recover afterwards. So some of the things that are really important across the board, the biggest thing I would say is collagen, because you're talking about collagen if you have a surgery, if you have a major bone injury, tendon, ligament.
Yeah.
What's important to go along with collagen is vitamin C. Vitamin C is necessary for collagen synthesis, so you need to pair those two things together. I didn't create it, I stole it, a gelatin recipe. Oh. So gelatin, again, accessible, easy.
Very easy. Very cheap.
Yeah, not like Jell-O.
Yeah.
Like plain, again,
Yeah.
I don't get this. Just plain Knox gelatin.
Yeah.
Make it with fruit juice, 100% fruit juice. I prefer either pomegranate or tart cherry juice. And you're going to add vitamin C into that so that you've got it on board. Have that an hour before you start your therapy session, so that it's in there, it's on board to help you, help your tendons, help all of your connective tissues, your skin, muscles. That 2 phases, kind of. Not that I need to explain this to you. So you have the acute injury, and then you have the rehabilitative phase. Yeah. A lot of people during the acute phase, they pull way back on energy. Yeah. Because I'm not working out. I'm not
calories. Yeah.
So you do need to pull back a little bit, but I think that many people underestimate how much energy their body requires for those initial repairs.
You're building tissue. I mean, that in itself, if you think about it, like taking something that's torn or something that's really strained, and you have to give it the right juice to be able to get on the right track.
Yeah. So during an immobilization period, things like creatine, that's going to help you. Yeah. Those kinds of things are going to help you. In terms of like overall immune system, because it's your immune system that's working to do those initial repairs, especially if you're talking about an acute injury. Vitamin D is really important, as is magnesium. Those two things, magnesium is required for vitamin D and calcium together on bones and,
the whole
again,
contraction cycle as well.
Yeah. So those things are really important. What you want to stay away from, though, in the initial phases, in the acute phase, is anti-inflammatory. Yes. Because inflammation is important at that time. That's when inflammation is good for you. Yes. Because your body is sending all of those things that need to be there. So when you're looking at like things like omega-3s, anti-inflammatory, but probably not the best time to take omega-3.
I'm so glad. There was actually a lot of meta-analyses on the use of NSAIDs, Tylenol or Advil, for example, ibuprofen, and saying that it actually slowed down the process, not only of healing, but also it lengthened the recovery of tendons, ligaments, joint, to actually recover from that initial injury by weeks and sometimes.
Yeah, because you're tamping down that inflammation process that's there to build it.
Exactly. Are there any other micronutrients and vitamins that athletes should be aware of for either injury recovery or physical therapy?
Other things that are important especially for bones, besides the vitamin D, calcium, magnesium, is vitamin K. K2 is really important for bone structure. They're doing a lot of research in not just injuries, but also osteoporosis, age-related or injury-related, especially for people who, in a lot of the aesthetic sports, when people deliberately really restrict their calories, it impacts their bone health. So they're doing research with vitamin K in that arena. They're doing it with osteoporosis, and they're doing it with non-weight-bearing athletes, cyclists, swimmers. They are more prone to bone loss, bone injuries, because they're not weight-bearing sports. So K2 is really good for that. What else we got there?
Magnesium, vitamin D, we got all those guys there, more or less.
Yeah, I think we talked about creatine,
Yep.
polyphenols, and antioxidants in general.
Inflammation.
When you're talking about chronic inflammation, using those things to dampen the bad things that are happening from inflammation. Is being able to kind of reduce the damage in those inflammatory pathways with polyphenols and antioxidants at that point in time.
What are some good sources of polyphenols?
Fruits, brightly colored fruits and vegetables. Those are your best. As long as they're really like oranges, strawberries, blueberries, tart cherries, pomegranates, those things that are really have that bright color. Yeah.
That's good to know. Last question I want to ask is, and actually two questions from our community. A question from Anne was, should I be avoiding certain types of protein, whether it be from whey protein or other kinds of protein in general, or even from the protein drinks that are pre-made, as I'm nearing that pre-menopausal stage in life? Doesn't really matter. People are worried about weight gain in that particular phase, and there's some information going around that's saying that, but I'm not familiar with that.
Yeah, I have not heard of any distinction between any particular type of protein other than what we talked about in terms of whey protein being your go-to for post-workout because it's easily absorbable.
Yeah.
And if you're looking at plant-based proteins, looking at your pea protein as being your primary source of that. In the perimenopausal world in general, the thing that's probably going to make the most difference, making sure that you are still getting enough energy, because what tends to happen with women in that period of life is they start to gain weight because they're losing estrogen and their cortisol is going up. So the cortisol is saying
Stress.
So the loss of estrogen is probably the single biggest issue to be addressed. But typically when women start to reduce intake overall, that's when the cortisol shoots up and it's like, I'm eating less, I'm working out more, but I'm still gaining weight. What is going on here? And it's more so that your body is in panic mode because it's not getting regular feedings. So you really need to take a look at overall, when you're having your food, make sure you have it before you fuel. Fuel before you're going to work out, because otherwise that's going to send your body into a bigger tailspin. And the biggest impact, unfortunately, is probably going to be the loss of estrogen.
That's interesting. So one of the things we talk about with our clients too over 30 and 40 is, have you had your hormones checked, levels for both men and women? Because whether it's low T or whether it's low estrogen or even low T in women can definitely influence their body composition and whatnot. And certainly that tied in with nutrition can really either have a negative or positive impact.
Yeah, but the important thing is don't cut back more. Find out what the problem is first, or do your best to find out whether it's beyond your nutritional control. But don't shortchange yourself. Don't keep cutting when you actually need to be fueling at the right time for the activity that you're going to be doing.
My other client, Megan, had asked from our community, what are some quick and easy ways to get protein into her day as a super busy PhD? And one of the things that she and I talked about, which we talked about too, was I'm a big fan of jerky. And so Trader Joe's, I think it's their original brand. It's in the green packaging. It's very low sodium, relatively speaking, very high in protein, and very low in calories. Same with their chicken soup, their broth. I'll just actually warm it up in the oven if I'm in a rush. Nuke it up and just drink it, and that's an extra 10 grams per cup. Are there ways that you also recommend people get it in?
Get it in first thing in the morning.
Hey, there you go.
Most people, if they have breakfast, you know that most people skip breakfast. My recommendation is always have breakfast and have a high protein breakfast, because the day is going to get out of your control. And you're going to be at 6 o'clock at night and have maybe 20 grams of protein, because we do tend to stack our protein later in the day. So my recommendation is always front load your day in general, and front load it with protein in particular. Eggs are a really good source. If you want to have, a lot of people have protein powder in their coffee, throw it in there. An easy way, yogurt, again, travels well. If you don't like eating breakfast, have something like a smoothie or a yogurt that's a little bit lighter but still is going to get your day started with protein.
Right.
But front loading is important.
That's great. Kathy, I want you to walk us through the process of how to work with you. What's that first, it sounds like you send a questionnaire to get more information first. What's that first consultation like?
So, yeah. So I have actually a couple of different things. So there's a try before you buy. So we get together for 20 minutes and just see what it is that you're trying to achieve and whether or not what I offer is going to fit the bill for you. So the 20-minute try before you buy, you can book it online. I offer a couple of different overall programs. So I do just your recreational athletes for people who either have or want to have an active lifestyle. So you can do for that, and for my performance program, basically it's your first 30 days. We go through what you're trying to achieve. You'll send me information about a day in your life, what you're currently looking, if you have a training program that you're looking to complete, if you have a season like you're a bowler, a softball player, a baseball, basketball, we can look at what your season looks like and start to work things out for that. I have what a la carte, where we can do a single session, we can do a group of sessions, and again, it all starts with what's a day in your life look like, what are you trying to achieve, and what do I think I can do for you. So I am putting up my website this weekend,
Nice.
And it'll be easy, fprnutrition.com.
Like that. Put that in the show notes.
And so that'll be going up this weekend. I also offer, actually, it's an app called
RX Food.
And I don't know of anybody else around here that offers it. And it can be a do-it-yourself thing, or you can bring it in along. It's part of the programs that I offer.
see.
But if you want to just to see where you are,
Yeah.
it's AI-based. Take pictures of everything that you're eating and drinking for 3 days. And it comes back and it gives you an analysis of what your average calories are, overall carbohydrate, protein, fat, alcohol. Are you primarily plant-based? Are you primarily animal-based? What's your saturated fat look like? So it gives you a nice breakdown of where you are, because some people think, hey, I have a really good diet, so let's see if you have a really good diet. And other people say, oh, I have such a crappy diet. Well, maybe it's not as bad as you think it is. It just gives you the opportunity on your own to say, where am I? Right. Where am I starting from? So it's really easy to use, and it's a do-it-yourself thing if you want to start there.
That's good to know. Kathy, so much for carving out some time for us.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me.
Pleasure.
Fun conversation.
Absolutely, yeah. And I'm sure we'll have to have you come on another time, because I think we just touched the tip of the iceberg as far as getting the whole breadth of nutrition here. We can dive into some specific topics in the future.
Yeah, it sounds good.
Thanks so much for tuning into today's episode. It really does mean a lot to us. And don't forget to like, share, subscribe, or comment if you got at least one or two helpful insights or takeaways to help you get to your next level.